Okay, I would like to welcome you all to this webinar on visual sound broadcasting. 10th of July 2020, Minister Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams published a policy direction in terms of Section 3, Section 2 of the ECA Act for ICASA to fast-track the licensing of digital sound broadcasting services in South Africa. South Africa has had several successful digital sound broadcasting trials going far back as 1997. That's 23 years ago, where Sentech conducted the first DAB pilot broadcasts under the auspices of SADIBA. I remember being part of the DAB tests on a ferry to Robben Island, demonstrating digital sound broadcasting with still pictures in 1999. That's how long back South Africa has been involved with digital broadcasting tests. The benefits of DSB is more programming choices to consumers, more opportunities for content creators, more competition in the market, spectrum efficiency for the regulator, and lower transmission costs for broadcasters. Today, we are in conversation with leading industry experts to unpack what digital sound broadcasting will mean for consumers, content creators, and broadcasters, and this includes community broadcasters. This webinar is hosted by SACIA, the Southern African Communications Industries Association. We are registered with SACWA. We are active in the broadcast and audiovisual sectors. We award professional designations based on an individual's proven skills and work experience. And we promote the adoption of professional standards and ethical business practices in the industry. My name is Eldred Dreyer. I am the chairperson of the Broadcast Industry Group within SACIA, and I will be moderating today's session. Now, I would like the panelists to introduce themselves. Dumiso, do you want to introduce yourself? Dumiso, you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Eldred. My name is Dumiso Dana. I am a project manager of the Digital Sound Broadcasting Council Committee from ICASA. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wanda. You're on mute, Wanda.
If you can hear me, just let me know. Yes, my name is Wanda. I'm the Chief Director for Technology at the Department of Communication and Digital Technologies. I am Chief responsible for the broadcast technology, primarily on broadcast digital migration project. I also lead the lead administrator with regards to the digital sound broadcasting element of the entire project of the government.
Okay, we seem to have a sound problem with Wanda's line. We'll see if we can fix that. But Wanda Dlangamandla is the Chief Director in the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies, and he was the author of this policy direction that was issued by the Minister. Nada, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Eldred. My name is Nada Watela, and I'm the Group Executive for SABC Radio. So I head up a portfolio of 19 radio stations on behalf of the SABC. Thank you.
Thank you, Nada. Nick?
Hi, I'm Nick Grubb. I'm the Chief Executive of Radio at ICASA Media. We operate 2 radio stations, Jacaranda and East Coast. We are a minority investor in another 4 radio stations. And I also currently chair the Commercial Radio Committee at the National Association of Broadcasters.
Okay, great. Thanks, Nick. Lynn, you want to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lynn Mansfield. I've been active in the broadcasting industry in South Africa for the last 46 years. I'm the chairperson of SADIBA, as well as a steering board member of World DAB.
Okay, thank you very much. So today's webinar will be an active, interactive webinar where we will have an audience poll throughout the event. If the audience have questions, they can write them in the chat section, and we will afford the panelists an opportunity to respond to them at the end of the webinar. So I'll now hand over to Kevin. Kevin is driving the technicalities of the webinar in the background, and we will start with our first poll. Over to you, Kevin.
Thank you. So, so the first question that I think we wanted to ask is what does digital sound broadcasting mean to you? So, from an audience perspective, if you can just your feedback, what does digital sound broadcasting mean to people that are participating in the market? I'm just going to hold this open for a couple of seconds. It should have come up already, and I see the votes are coming in. And 52%, 53% of people have cast their vote. 61, come on. For those that haven't voted yet, make your fingers do the walking. We just got up to around just over 70%, so I'm going to 80%. Last few seconds, I'm going to close the poll. 85, or let's see if we can get to 90. 90%, 89%, and we'll close the poll and we'll share the results. So if I can share the results, here we are. 43% consider it to be AM and FM signals in a digital form, 50% broadcasting sound and pictures using digital transmission technologies, and 7% defining it as internet radio. So there you go. That's the perception of individuals that are participating in this. Aldrin's finding it very amusing.
That's very interesting. Yeah, thank you very much, Kevin. So one of the purposes of this webinar is really to educate our members about what digital sound broadcasting is. And now I will hand over to Lynn Mansfield, and he will spend 5 minutes just explaining to us the basics very briefly, what digital sound broadcasting is. Lynn, over to you.
Thank you, Aldrin. I think radio broadcasting, particularly in the African context, is probably the most important medium for people to get access to information. And AM and FM radio has been with us for a large number of years, but it is reaching a point where the spectrum is pretty well saturated, and no new entrants can enter this market. So digital radio makes use of a far more effective way of using spectrum, and also improves the quality, and it has a lot of data capability. So it is a replacement really for FM and AM. But in most markets, what we've seen is that FM still remains. In major markets like Australia, where there's quite a big rollout of DAB, most of the car radios in the vehicle still have FM. So the two coexist, and in fact, in South Africa, part of our aim in SADIBA was to trial all these technologies, and we proved categorically that FM, DRM and DAB Plus could work in the same area without any problems. Thanks, Aldrin.
Okay, thank you very much, Lynn. So to clarify the question then about what DSB is, it is the transmission. It's not the broadcasting of FM and AM in a digital format. It's not. It's the broadcasting of sound and pictures using digital transmission technologies. And those within the policy direction, those that have read it, you'll see in there the technologies are listed. and I'll just call them out very briefly. It's DRM30 to complement AM sound broadcasting, DRM Plus to complement FM sound broadcasting, DAB Plus to complement VHF sound broadcasting. Okay, so those are the standards. Okay, so the next question, obviously the policy direction is quite clear on what the objectives are, on what the department has directed the regulator to implement. Two of those I would like to call out. One is encouraging investment in the broadcasting sector, and the other one, which Lynn already alluded to, is to ensure the optimum allocation and assignment of radio frequency spectrum. And here I want to highlight the point in support of growth and development of the broadcast sector. Now, as we know, radio is still a very popular consumption medium in South Africa, despite it being heavily regulated and having a flat compounded growth rate of 2% year on year. With streaming services becoming more available in South Africa and with advertising spend growing on the internet, these objectives, encouraging investment and growth and development in the sector. I pose the question now to the panel, and I would like the department Wanda to give the first opening comments on this. Will these developments not hinder or stunt the achievement of these two objectives, encouraging investment and growth and development in the sector? Wanda?
Indeed. I hope you can hear me much better now. You can open earphones.
Yeah, Wanda, your sound is still breaking up quite a lot. Okay, while we give Wanda a chance to fix his audio, we have another audience poll. Before I give a chance to the other panelists to comment. The next audience poll is: will DSB replace FM and AM and FM radio? So Kevin, over to you.
Yeah, so actually I launched that poll at the beginning of Wanda's difficulties. At the moment, 77% of the audience have voted. 53% assert no, but actually 22% saying yes and 23% unsure. So quite a lot of uncertainty. At this stage, 82% of individuals have participated in the vote. So I'm going to close it, and I'm going to share the results so that everybody can see. Here we go, 54%. The answer is no, 21% yes, 25% sure. Let's hope that Wanda can get his microphone sorted out. And if not, perhaps somebody else could pick up on that question.
Okay, so the question was for the panel. So I'll allow the rest of the panel members then to comment on it. And let me just clarify that question again. So radio is still a popular consumption medium in South Africa. It is heavily regulated, with streaming services becoming more available in SA and advertising spend growing on the internet. Will the objective of this policy direction of encouraging investment and growth and development in the sector not hinder or stunt the achievement of those objectives? So I open it up to the panel to share their views on this. And maybe if I can then select, Lynn, if you want to go first.
The digital radio a more efficient way of using the spectrum. And what we've seen even in more advanced countries like the UK, where they have the majority of cars now come out standard with a DAB radio. They're also connected to the internet. The majority of people are still listening to radio the way they used to listen to radio. So radio consumption, we see that the internet adds to radio, but I don't see it as a direct replacement. The two can coexist. And the fact that the mobility of radio, you know, if you think of a shepherd in the field, radio is his friend. It entertains him. You can't do the internet there. And also, particularly in Africa, with the high costs of data, you know, people use it very sparingly. So I think that was one of the issues that killed in America, a very good technology. They had about 2 million subscribers. They charged $10 a month for the service. And then the Americans realized, but radio has been free. Why are we now paying for radio? And a very great technology died. And people still receive radio in America free.
Okay, thank you, Len. Wanda? You need to unmute.
Okay. Does it sound better?
No, it's still the same. You. Yeah, can I recommend that you connect using your phone, Wanda, and not the laptop? Maybe just disconnect and then reconnect using your phone. Nada, do you want to comment on will new streaming services hinder or stunt the growth of and the adoption of encouraging investment in the broadcasting sector?
Look, I really don't think that it would stunt the growth of the sector. I quite agree with Lynn. The internet is radio's best friend. What we find is that the kind of things that we dabble in right now, your streaming services, your podcasts, your even the social media, it complements what we are doing on the traditional platforms. So there's a lot of activity that is happening on every radio station's website, every radio station's social media pages. But I don't think we need to underestimate the resilience of radio as a traditional broadcast medium, because we have seen even in the countries that have experimented before us in terms of digital radio, that they've had to abandon some of the projects and revert back to the to traditional, because people's habits as well. People are so used to listening to radio, the way that they do on the FM and on the normal radio sets and on their normal car radios, but the mobility that is then provided, by the digital mediums is very complementary, and we see a lot of uptake and a lot of opportunities in that space. But I think these things are all very complementary to each other.
Okay, so I know we've got a balanced panel, and it was selected specifically for that reason. So Nick, I would like to give you the opportunity to share your view on this question.
Thanks. Thanks, guys. I think, look, at the end of the day, any advancement in technologies around providing easier access at a better quality and more opportunities to consumers, we must as an industry support. And so, I don't want what I'm about to say necessarily to be construed as opposition wholesale to this technology. I think the point from a commercial player's perspective, from a Cohesa Media perspective in particular, is that we see this technology as iterative rather than transformational. And so long as it is that, as long as it's not necessarily going to replace the FM and AM signals, then it is by necessity an additional cost, an additional platform that needs to be populated accordingly. And I think that in the current competitive landscape, the internet streaming, podcast on demand, digital media, it is an entirely unregulated space. And so the barriers to entry that existed for for players who wanted to enter the radio market have come down significantly through digital already. And it is true that at the moment, particularly in streaming, it's the current media players that are dominating that environment in the South African context. But that's also just because we have allowed halo to drive listeners to that digital adjacency. It will happen in South Africa with the adoption of 5G and so on, that access to digital streaming will become a lot easier, a lot cheaper, and a lot more ubiquitous for the consumer. And therefore, I think that it's in the arena of digital where we're going to see our biggest level of competition as traditional broadcasters. We as an entity have a substantial amount of regulatory obligations on license holders, and we are competing in the streaming and digital space with people who have none of those. In fact, many of them are global players who are even taking advertising revenues locally out the country. So the competitive environment worries me. Digital sound broadcasting as a platform is, it's a better form of radio. And I think on that basis, it's to be looked at positively. However, it is as a producer, it will be another cost and another platform that we will have to populate and have to pay for the transmission. And as much as it's a much cheaper transmission platform, even if it's 20% to the cost of FM, that's going to be an additional 20% of transmission costs that will now sit parallel to our fixed costs as a business. So it's a complicated environment at the moment. So I'm certainly not necessarily a quick adopter of this technology as much as I see some of the benefits that it brings.
Okay, thank you for that, Nick. So the policy does say that ICASA needs to make regulations to also provide for new entrants to come into the market. So I think maybe a question to the regulator at this point in time is, how long do we I think a lot of the audience have this question in their mind: how long would they need to wait, especially when it comes to new entrants, before DSB becomes a reality in South Africa? So Dumisa is the project leader for DSB at ICASA, and I would like to give him now the opportunity to just talk to us through the processes and the timelines until the licensing of DSB services can happen in South Africa. Dumisa, over to you.
Thank you very much, Alfred. Currently, the authority is working towards coming up with a final regulation. Meaning currently, we do not have a time frame for the licensing of DSB. I'll go back into the documents that have been already published by the regulator. On the 29th of March 2018, the regulator published a discussion document on digital sound broadcasting. The main purpose of that discussion document was for the regulator to give a notice to the public to say they will conduct an inquiry in terms of Section 4B of the ICASA Act number 13 of 2000. The purpose of that inquiry was to examine the implementation of DSP services in South Africa. And then the other purpose for that was to examine the manner in which this DSP services implementation can improve the spectrum efficiency and management. That was the purpose of that discussion document. And then secondly, the regulator published the findings document and the position paper. That document, it was published on the 29th of March, 2019. That document entailed the information which was submitted by interested parties. An example, like the information they inserted there, it was in two forms. One, it was the written presentation, and then the second one, it was the oral presentation, meaning that the public hearings were conducted. Thereafter, the authority came up with its own position based on the inputs or submissions that were made by the interested parties. Currently, in this financial year, the authority is working towards publishing the draft DSP regulations. From now on, I can say, like, during this financial year, that document will be out to the public for comments and also for them to make the oral and written submissions. What can say that on the issue of licensing, that information is also entailed into the draft DSP regulations. But unfortunately, since the document has not yet been published, I am unable to divulge what is in that document. So far, this is the developments that has been made by the regulator in terms of what we're coming up with the process of licensing. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Ndemiso. Thank you very much. So I think if it's going to be published in this financial year still, so we're looking at somewhere next year for that process to be kick-started for new entrants to be licensed. Okay, so I see Wanda is back. I just wanted to give Wanda an opportunity just to comment on if new technologies like streaming technologies, podcasts, would have an impact on the objectives as set out in the policy direction that the minister has issued. Wanda? Wanda, your mic is on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can
hear me now, Aldred? Oh, is it much better? Thanks. Yes, lovely. Yes, and greetings everybody once more. I don't know what happened with that laptop earlier on. Yeah, maybe just to give a broader perspective on the reason behind the policy direction. Really, as you know, from government perspective, the government's role really is to create an enabling environment and to drive the developmental agenda, you know, in relation to the guiding principles of the National Development Plan. So the introduction, therefore, of digital sound broadcasting is meant really to serve those two main purposes, and the objective is to serve industry as well as to serve the consumer. And basically the entire value chain, right? So So in that regard, then what we're saying is that much as government has these objectives in place, we cannot really influence or direct the market trends, as it were. Rather, you know, the trends are driven by the consumer, the trends are driven by industry. The role of government really is to create that enabling environment. That is why one of the considerations was that we are not going to make we are not going to transition directly from analog broadcasting to digital broadcasting. Rather, have those two systems coexisting up until such time that, you know, the adoption and the market has matured enough to be completely digital sound, as it were. You know, unlike in the case we have with television digital migration. So yeah. Just then to summarize, then what we're saying is that we're trying to create that bigger enabling environment and to drive that developmental agenda and to serve both industry and consumers in relation to creating, you know, innovation in relation to broadening the platforms and broadening the choice for the consumer and the industry. Thank you.
Okay, Wanda, thank you very much for that. While I was reading the policy direction, there was one clause that stood out for me, and it is the one that is the preamble just before the objectives were listed, and I just want to read an extract of that. Desirous to enable broadcasters to remain relevant, current and empowered, to compete in an all IP services and network converged environment, to provide certainty within the broadcasting sector, to ensure that there is spectrum efficiency, quality, and the following I want to highlight, and affordability for content developers to develop more much needed content within South Africa, and to attain the goals for universal service and access to all. Now, before I pose the question to the panel, I would like Kevin then to do another poll on the audience, and this one will focus on, will take us into the next phase of the webinar, where we're going to talk about the opportunities around for content creators. Kevin? Okay, so the question is, do you see a commercial opportunity to establish a DAB plus or DRM channel in South Africa? Okay, so Kevin, you will guide us on how long the poll will be open. Kevin, are you there?
I am. I had my microphone muted, but I'm just keeping an eye on it. At this stage, 75% of the audience have cast their vote, so I'm going to keep it open for a couple more seconds. Seems to be fairly stable. Come on, somebody click the button. 75, 75, and I'm going to close it now. I think we've got enough information to move forward. And here are the results of the poll.
Okay.
So 50% yes. I'm very surprised. 46% say that there is insufficient information available to make a decision at this stage.
Okay, interesting. That's very interesting. So this then takes us to the next phase of our webinar, and the question I would like to pose to the panel is then, and I would like Nada to start on this one. How can the introduction of digital sound broadcasting create opportunities for content creators to create much more needed content in South Africa? Nada, you wanna share your views?
Look, the availability of spectrum on its own, it means that there's opportunities for players who've wanted to come in, but who have not been able to. And also, digitally based methods of creating content have become much easier. You see a lot of young people these days using computer-based programs to create content in their homes or wherever they are, that could find expression in some of these channels that will be opened up. For instance, at the SABC, we always look forward to opening up our platforms to smaller players who can contribute content, but right now they are not able to because of, they don't have access to the right technology that is compatible to ours. The SABC has spent, an enormous amount of money in the past few years upgrading its systems and processes and studios and infrastructure, getting ready for the digital future. And I think in there are opportunities embedded for small content creators to be able to participate. It's an opportunity that we also welcome with both hands. The possibilities of launching even more channels. The SABC right now is over-reliant on the commercial radio channels, for instance, our 3 commercial stations, even though our PBS stations are also, funded commercially. But, it gives us an opportunity as well to explore with, more niche services that we can offer the consumers out there, and to also open up opportunities for content creators to participate in the process. So I see a lot of opportunities opening up for a lot of participants, and for SABC partnering, with communities in ensuring that the stories, in the various areas that we cannot reach right now in South Africa, find expression in the channels, that would be available.
Thank you, Nada. Before I ask the other panelists to share their view, do you see the introduction of digital sound broadcasting services as a catalyst to the public broadcaster achieving its goals of universal service, radio being available everywhere in the country?
Definitely, quite definitely. But like I said earlier, I think we need to move to an environment where the two coexist. We still maintain the traditional ways, because in South Africa we know that not everybody will have access to digital platforms, but this will definitely close the gaps for the SABC to reach audiences, in the hinterlands of this country where, people cannot afford, to get on the digital revolution. So that would close the gap, and that will ensure that we achieve universal access. But also, it's an opportunity for us to reduce our costs of distribution. As you know, we have this vast network of transmitters all over the country. We cover the country, I think, between 80–85%. Lynn would know more about this because he worked in that space for a very long time. But there's still gaps in terms of how we cover the country, and our mandate really is to cover the country wall to wall. So there is an opportunity for us to close the gap and ensure that we reach every citizen. But I don't think, prematurely, drop the traditional way of reaching the citizens in case the uptake of digital sound broadcasting isn't as wonderful as we think it will be.
Okay, I would like Ndumiso now to share his view on the subject, opportunity for content creators. Do you have a view on this, Ndumiso?
Thank you, Albert. I think one of the issues which address this content issue is one of the benefits on the consumer side. An example, like the consumers will be able to choose the service they want, because there will be a new multimedia services, the likes of video, the text, and additional data. Once there is a content, there will be various ways that the consumers out there will be able to access that content. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Nick, your views?
I think certainly, I mean, I agree with Nada's point about the niche content, and I think that there will be some opportunities, particularly on for linear live content on niche subjects. For example, pop-up radio stations around special events, or those kind of things that might add value to consumers for kind of acute, very niche special interest issues, which is something that DAB provides that FM can't, and that we could deploy. We could suddenly divvy up our frequencies and deploy another couple of pop-up stations around those sorts of things, and that in itself, I suppose, provides some opportunity. But I'm not really convinced that the problem in South Africa is a lack of opportunities for content creators. I think the problem that we face is an uneven distribution, even in the current broadcasting environment, of revenues in the sector. And my question is DAB going to, or digital sound broadcasting, going to help that? I mean, we've got community radio stations that many of which are way below the break-even line, and are struggling to sustain themselves in a difficult situation. Now, opening up new entrants in that circumstance isn't necessarily, all that's going to do is divide those revenues even, amongst more and more people. So I'm not sure. So whilst I see the benefits, and again, I don't want to come across like I'm a naysayer altogether. I see the benefits of this iteration in our technology, but I'm not convinced that it's solving the right problems in the sector. I think the problem that we have is sustainability in the sector as a whole. There are a couple of stations, and admittedly some of ours, that do very well in the commercial sector, and then there is a kind of mid-tier of current FM broadcasters that are very close to the break-even line, and then you've got a whole sector, particularly in the community sector, but also some of the commercials that really struggle to fund content creation, and sustain their broadcasting technology. Now, so long as I said earlier, so long as the intention here is not to replace the broadcast transmission with digital sound broadcasting technologies, which I admit are cheaper, then it means that anybody who wants to stay relevant is going to have to add those transmission costs to their current broadcast. So I'm not sure that there's a lot of benefit to the consumer beyond that. Beyond a higher quality, they've got to invest in a decoder, in a EVA. There's challenges around that. So that's where I'm not entirely convinced it's going to lead to this floodgate of content creation. I think YouTube is perhaps more effective than this one.
Okay, thank you very much, Nick, for that contribution, and Nada and Dumiso. So before we open up the webinar for Q&A, my one last question to all the panelists, and I would like to give each of you an opportunity to respond. Is the industry ready for the introduction of DSB? So Lynn, you can go first.
Yeah, I think I was burning to answer some of these questions. I think one back and look at what is happening with these technologies, and they're not dissimilar to what is happening in the television industry. If you take South Africa, there were 4 free-to-air channels available in this country. With DTT, if we stay on standard definition, there's the ability to host 140 channels. That's not just a few more. That is a huge step. So what does that do to the broadcaster? But then when one looks at what happened with the last FM frequencies that were, the ICASA put out an ITA, for 3 frequencies, there were 32 applicants. So that shows the appetite of new entrants wanting to get into this market to invest their money. And when you look at what is happening in the unregulated market, the streaming world, both for radio and television, broadcasting is a highly regulated environment throughout the world. And these streaming guys who don't even live in your country are competing with you in your own backyard in a totally unregulated environment. I would see that as a bigger threat. But when it comes to content, when one looks at content and the generation of new content, I'll give you an example of a radio station in the UK, Absolute. Absolute, they still have their mother brand, but they've launched a niche channel, Absolute 60s, Absolute 70s, Absolute 80s, Absolute 90s. They have together, they've retained their main brand, but they've divided into niche channels. So if you want to listen to a particular genre, it is more focused to you, you can. So, and in looking at the transmission costs and all the additional costs, they're still making more money than they had with the mother brand. So I think, there's a lot of uncertainty and what works where, but there is big opportunity.
Okay, thanks, Len. Demiso, do you want to share your view?
Thank you, Alright. Based on the inputs that we got during the publication of discussion document, we saw that there is a huge number of people who want this introduction of DSP to take place in South Africa. One of the issues that we tried to look at is to how to accommodate many people to be part and parcel of this DSP. One of the things that we came up with, we understand that it will be maxes. And the advantage to accommodate the other new entrants into the party is that one multiplexer can accommodate an example around 20 to 21 channels, meaning that those new players want to come on board. And then those who showed interest, they'll be able to be catered into the space of digital sound broadcasting. If I can make an example about the country that we once visited, we saw that the likes of Australia, we saw that even community broadcasters, they are having a huge interest into DSP. What Australia did in one of their maxes, they put the commercial broadcaster and also the community broadcaster into one max. But Australia, to categorize the community broadcasters, they use the term called widespread community broadcasters, meaning that these community broadcasters can transmit at a longer distance. So as I'm saying, based on what we received during the publication of the discussion document, we saw that there is a demand and a necessity for digital sound broadcasting. As I articulated also before, there's also a huge interest in the community broadcasters. If I can mention an example about the community broadcasters, we have conducted the trials. I can mention the likes of Radio Pulpit, whereby they conducted trials on DRM 30, and then also the likes of Wecodec. They also conducted the trials on DRM Plus, which means it shows that there is a demand and there is a need for this introduction of DSP. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ndemiso. So we have 11 minutes left, and I know that the audience is burning to ask their questions. So I will now hand over to Kevin just to ask, are there any questions, Kevin?
Actually, I think my computer's about to burst into flames. So yes, there are questions, and if I can just address them. So the best and quickest market entry should be for community radio. They have been waiting so long due to the moratorium, and now they could start immediately with DRM Plus as the spectrum is available. So I know Demisor spoke about community channels, and certainly that's one of the areas that we see as being particularly relevant to the kind of digital sound broadcasting sector. I don't know if you want to expand upon your answer and talk specifically about community radios taking up this opportunity.
Demisor, do you want to comment? Or
Okay,
any other panelists?
Okay, thanks, Kevin. When I talk about these community broadcasters, I can say that the tricky part with them is that they ask the regulator in terms of would fund their migration from analog into digital. So like we as the regulator cannot say like we are in a position to say like we can fund those community broadcasters now. So far it's a little bit tricky in terms of the funding, but on the other side there is a huge interest from them. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else want to answer?
I think. Okay.
Okay. Lynn first, and then Wanda.
Alfred, I think with SADIBA and the NAB doing a joint trial together, it was always the intent to ensure that whatever we do, we can accommodate all three tiers of broadcasting. That's commercial, public broadcasting, and community. So I think, we're exploring technologies further. As Demisor said, there's DRM Plus, which works in the FM band. That could be a good solution. We're also looking at small-scale DAB, and in fact, we're busy putting a webinar together, which will happen early next year, focusing purely on community broadcasting and how it can be accommodated. But when you look at what has happened in the world, the first country to switch off FM was Norway. It was a rocky road towards the end to actually do that. The next country that's looking at switching off is Switzerland. Now, the big driver and why these people want to do this is that what they're indicating is that the signal distribution costs for DAB are 1/10 of the cost they're paying for analog. Now, that's a huge saving. So, one must look at these technologies. As Nick was saying, it's additional cost, but how much additional cost? And what I see with this digital migration, it's not about the technology only. It's about migrating your audiences from one platform to another platform. And the next thing would be to migrate your revenue from one platform to another, and hopefully also try and grow that. So it's quite a complex transition, but definitely, community radio must be accommodated.
Okay, Wanda, you also wanted to comment?
Yes, Aldred. Yes, I like to think of this as a series of dominoes. The limiting element in this regard is the receiver equipment. There is opportunity for the community radio. Likewise, there is an opportunity for other tiers of broadcasting, because if you think about it from the supply side, the costs are vastly minimized in terms of the supply, in terms of the transmitter equipment, the value chain, in terms of the source studio equipment and so on. Those costs are quite minimized. And the problem really is from the receiver side in respect of the consumer. If we can get this domino to fall, in other words, getting the ball rolling in terms of getting the manufacturing or the cheap availability of these kind of receivers, maybe even through cell phones, through chip receivers and so on. I believe there is an opportunity there. Thank you.
Okay, so Kevin, I think we have space for one more question. Do you want to select which burning question you want to take next?
Ooh, so a couple of questions. The responsibility of making a choice. Here we go. Broadcasting also needs to be available in emergency situations, and therefore it cannot be replaced by streaming, as streaming platforms will collapse in an emergency situation. I think that's if I could turn that into a question, it would be, if the alternative to digital sound broadcasting is streaming, what are the advantages of streaming over digital sound broadcasting and vice versa?
Okay, Nada, do you want to give it a go? Maybe Nada and Lynn.
Okay, you can go
first. Okay, I think, when one looks at disasters that occurred across the world, and particularly I was in the Caribbean, and they get it every year, and the only form of communication that they can get information to people during disasters is radio. All the telecoms networks go down, and so I think in an area particularly that's there's so many tornadoes and that take place, the importance of radio is absolutely crucial. All these other technologies seem to go down.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement with Lynn on that one, and hence I was saying this is something we have to consider quite carefully, because also people's habits, when we've seen it with the COVID pandemic, people who would be using other means to get information, but when the lockdown was announced, and when everything was unfolding fast, they tended to revert back to their traditional ways of sourcing information. So people listened more to radio, as they are perceived as a most reliable, source of information. So they reverted to the traditional way of getting their information. So yeah, I would also caution on the streaming services as the only way.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I think, Kevin, we have one more 1 minute to run the last poll before I do the conclusion and summary, and also the thank you. Do you want to do the last poll, Kevin? Okay, so the question is, do you look forward to receiving the first broadcasts of DAB Plus and DRM? Kevin, you will talk us through the results.
I can, although I'll put them up on the screen. At this stage, 39% of people have voted, 45. 26% of people at the moment are skeptical. It's actually quite interesting seeing the way that these figures go up and down. So we've been open 56, 57 seconds, 62% of people have voted. So I'm going to move my mouse closer to the close button, and let's close the poll and then share the results. And here we are, 55% of people absolutely cannot wait, 30% a little skeptical that it will ever happen, and 16% people prefer listening to streaming services. So yes.
Okay, very interesting. Very interesting. So in summary, I've jotted it down a couple of points. Radio is still big business in South Africa. The introduction of digital sound broadcasting will bring the opportunity for new entrants to enter into the market. And as we heard from the regulator, there was huge interest for new licensees to enter the market. According to the timeline, we're looking at next year, maybe late next year, for the process of licensing new entrants to start. There is opportunity for content creators, but the one thing that is important is receivers, so the availability of receivers. And I think that's another topic on its own. We can create 10 webinars just speaking about the availability of receivers, but receivers are important and they are needed in order for consumers to receive the services. Transmission costs will go down. However, for existing incumbent broadcasters, it may be more of a challenge in terms of managing their costs. And in a disaster situation, you typically find that the transmitter is the one that is still standing. You typically have the ISPs that are down, the internet connections that are down, and you can still receive your broadcasts, emergency broadcasts via radio. And I also would like to probably mention television as well. So I would like to thank firstly the panelists for their participation and for accepting to be part of today's discussion. I know our hour doesn't do it justice. We can spend a lot more time on this topic, but what we can do is we can break it up into chunks, and we can have a series of these webinars to discuss and debate digital sound broadcasting. To the audience, thank you very much for making this webinar interactive and exciting, and thank you very much for all the questions. I know we didn't have enough time to get to each and every question, but we look forward to engaging with you at the next webinar. To Kevin, thank you very much for arranging this webinar. And if you are interested in becoming a member of SACIA, then please visit the website www.sacia.org.za or reach out directly to myself or to Kevin. I would like to thank you all for your attendance and for your participation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Kevin. Thank you, Nick. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, keep well.
You too.
Okay.
Thanks, Aldred.